So I'm sure at this point you've heard there's a new Scorpius on the way, one with an EMP and from what from what I understand, a quantum disruption as well. It doesn't interdict, it doesn't pull people out of quantum, but it can prevent people from going away or launching into quantum, whatever you want to call it, warping away. And personally, I have to say that it is a terrible, terrible idea. And not for any reason that, you might think, oh, well, it's a bad ship, or, oh, its DPS is not up to snuff, or its maneuverability, blah, 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 blah. No, the reason why it's a bad ship is not so much in terms of the performance that players are going to get out of it. It's actually going to be a very convenient ship, a very good ship, but it challenges the very core of what an MMO should be. It's too many tools in one box. And it also, in a way, it highlights the shortcomings of the way that chips are built and packaged and delivered to the players in Star Citizen right now, which shows an almost insane lack of forethought into what these ships are going to be. So we're going to kind of try to pull this whole thing apart. I'm going to try to explain to you my point of view on this. And keep in mind, by no means am I saying that this is a weak ship, or this ship is not going to, create a lot of very salty tears. Oh, it will. But I think we have to kind of look at it and what it fundamentally says about the game, CIG, and what CIG thinks of the community, and how little thought CIG puts into some of these ships that they put out. There are ships in Star Citizen that are just so good, so well thought out, so well planned out. Or there's a ship that comes along a little later that kind of, complements another ship. The two perfect examples are the Constellation and the Corsair. The Constellation and the Corsair are very comparable ships, but where you could say that the Corsair is a bit more of an attack ship, whereas the Constellation is a bit more survivable, a bit tankier. You can expect that from a Constellation. Its turret layout, I would argue, is superior to the turret layout of the Corsair, because of course you have turrets top and bottom 360 degrees, which makes it a lot easier to engage with those turrets. Though in the case of the Corsair, you can bring those two turrets forward and you can contribute to the firepower that the pilot is putting down on a target. So one is more attack, one is more defensive. Also with the Constellation, you have the addition of the snub fighter, which is something that I think that with the new flight system that CIG is proposing, could see a lot more use and a lot more utility and create a much more challenging target than ships would otherwise expect. I think that it will be a foe that will be easily underestimated, and for some people quite tragically so. But you can look at these two ships and say, okay, there is really no obvious answer here unless you're talking about the personal way that you want to play, right? Either one is good, either one is useful, and both arguably can get you to the same spot, but one is a little bit more this way, one is a little bit more that way. And so the debate of ownership really comes down to style. Your personal style, not just in terms of aesthetics, what looks better to you, but your style and how you approach the game. How do you solve the equations that you're challenged with? Now, when you look at this new Scorpius, EMP, quantum disruption, supposedly all under one roof, it's too useful. It's too many tools in one box. It becomes too obvious of an answer. One of the problems that I think CIG doesn't really understand is, yeah, of course, if you're just looking to dip your hand into the community's wallet, bravo, great idea. The problem is that for the game's balance, this is a terrible idea. For the game's development, this is a terrible idea. And for the community, ultimately, I think it's a terrible idea too, because it puts into people's heads the idea that there is a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem, and that everything should be convenient. We live in a game where we try to get players adjusted to the idea of inconvenience. Oh, by the way, don't forget to drink water. Oh, by the way, don't forget to bring food. Oh, by the way, you lost your guns. All these things like that. But then we sit there and we make a ship that is kind of like the perfect gank ship. Never mind all those other ships. Here's the perfect gank ship. It has EMP. It has quantum disruption. It's a heavy fighter. Now, is it going to lose its turret? I would say probably, but it's not really a catastrophic loss of firepower. If you think about 5 or 6 of these things working in concert, it becomes the perfect gank ship. It makes the composition of a pirate fleet much more obvious. And, being a heavy fighter, arguably, with the right modifications, you can probably get enough range out of it to do what you need to do over a very wide area. So that alone, I think, is enough of a reason to kind of take a step back and say maybe the marketing department's getting a little too far ahead of itself, kind of throwing out ship ideas like this, because, balance-wise, it's a terrible idea. It just makes it too obvious. Now, another thing that it kind of is really bad about the Scorpius is that for a lot of the ships in Star Citizen, you go inside, and one of the cool features that we've gotten over the last few years has been the physicalization of modules in the ship. Oh, here's where the power core is. Here's where your coolers are. Here's where your shield is. All this stuff. But noticeably absent is the ability to subtract in different modules to gain different types of utility. Maybe you want to take out a cooler and put in a secondary smaller shield generator or something along those lines. You want to change things up. You want to take that ship and alter it to better accentuate its strengths or maybe mitigate some of its weaknesses. The idea of having an EMP, well, maybe you can have an EMP on just about any ship in Star Citizen, but it's going to cost you another module. We haven't put that infrastructure in place that allows us to do that, right? So we've kind of made it, this is the ship, this is what it's going to be, and this is all it's ever going to be, and there's no room for customization beyond that. And always making them bespoke, I don't think is a good thing. I think, in the past, CIG has certainly talked about quantum disruption modules, but now these functionalities all seem to be tied to variants that you can buy rather than modules you can acquire in the game. And I think that is kind of like a bad message to send, when it should be, here's the ship, here's its core capabilities, here's a couple extra module slots, what do you want to do with it? I think that would be a far better way to allow players to customize their ships, and therefore keep a lot more ships relevant rather than just saying, oh, here's the new alpha dog, go get this. Now, arguably, to a point, a lot of you might think, well, obviously when they put this on the Scorpion, they're going to take away the turret, right? And that would be the logical approach. Whether or not that's confirmed at this point, I don't know. As of the recording of this video, I don't think it's out there yet. But that would seem like it would be the logical approach, right? You take away the 4 guns on the turret, and so you kind of cut the firepower down by a fair chunk, and possibly even take out the co-pilot seat, and that's where you sit in your EMP and your quantum disruption. But I would argue that the game would be better served if all ships could make that choice. I think that the win here would be to add extra module slots, or to make certain modules optional and replaceable with other modules. I think that that's the direction that CIG should be heading in, and just kind of making a cash grab variant of the Scorpion is really, I don't see how this better serves the game apart from financially. I think that what would better serve the balance of the game, and what would better engage the community in a positive way, would be the opening up of much more creative ship loadouts than just the standard fixed ship loadouts that CIG kind of comes up with and says, this is what this ship is, and this is pretty much all that it's going to be. I mean, certainly there are ships like the Caterpillar that are supposed to have modules, and we've heard about this for a long, long time, which has never materialized. And I mean, I gotta say that it's kind of funny how when there's a moment where we can grab some quick money by ripping a turret off of the Scorpius and adding this stuff in, it's very funny that gets done, but modularity for the Caterpillar is just back burner and whatnot. Obviously, because the Scorpius is within reach of a lot more players, and something that a lot more players would seek to want, which is an obvious advantage in certain types of PvP or certain activities. And so it would obviously make a lot more money. So it doesn't really serve the game so much as it serves, financial interests, because it doesn't really do much for the game. I don't like the idea of a ship that has too many functionalities built into it. I like the idea that there's a certain amount of friction, that there's a certain amount of meaningful choice in the ships that you choose in Star Citizen. For a long time, when players were getting together and forming their communities, it's like, oh, well, we're going to need a refueling ship. Oh, well, so-and-so's got a Starfarer. Oh, well, we're going to need a repair ship. That's okay. So-and-so has a Crucible. Well, where are we going to land our fighters? Bobby's got an Idris, so we're good. And we can cycle the fighters through that. And, everyone was able to bring a different thing to the table, and there was no real set formula for how you kind of put that whole thing together to get those functionalities. Now, with all of this being on one ship, it seems like a little bit too obvious of an answer. It depends on how much pain that loss of a turret truly becomes for the Scorpius. That, I think, is going to be the real determining factor. But I think that the game would have been better served had we opened up variability in modules and variability in what modules we can put on our ship, and maybe even making it so that EMP and distortion modules were now available in shops, and we had the ability in our ships to swap them out. But it also underlines that problem with the way that a lot of ships were designed, which was that in the end they would all be fixed, in that here's your shield generator and you can never add another one, even a smaller shield generator, at the expense of, say, a cooler or whatnot. That's rather unfortunate. And I gotta say that I don't really like the way that this is kind of going. I feel that this is kind of a step in the wrong direction. I think that we should be looking at, functionality or capability that we can add to the game that keeps more aging platforms relevant as the game's design and as its power levels of various ships and various things shift, that ships have that variability built into them, or they have those possibilities built into them so that they can adapt to those changes, so that existing platforms don't get aged out.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.